Hello everyone and welcome to today's webinar, Hybrid Automation Testing, Meeting the Challenge of Testing Diverse Devices and Operating Systems. Before we start, I'd like to go over a few items so you know how to interact in today's webinar. We will give you the opportunity to submit questions to our presenter by typing them into the window of the control panel. The control panel is situated on the right-hand side of your screen. Questions will be addressed at the end of the webinar. Today's webinar will last for approximately 45 minutes with 15 minutes at the end for your questions. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to our presenter, Shlomi Shimoni. Over to you, Shlomi.
Thank you. Hi everybody, I'm Shlomi and I am the head leader of the Automation DevOps department in Qualitest, and we will talk today about hybrid automation, what we need it for and how we can use it. So today in the market we have an endless platforms of mobile devices and web browsers. We have endless Android devices from Chinese manufacturers, and last quarter Apple released 3 different iPhones devices just for one release. So it's a lot, and of course we have 4 different browsers that competitive each other, like Chrome and Firefox. So actually it's increased our amount of test plans and testing resources to test everything together, even in automation the classic ways. It's increased our amount code repository because we need to duplicate a lot of functions that we write, and the increasing of setups increase the cost of physical layer of devices that we need, and we increase the behavior of point of views. Every platforms behave a little differently, so we need to bring up everything a little bit differently when we are implemented in our customer or in our lab. So what is actually the hybrid automation? It's a cross-platform solution methodology. It solves the problem of cross-platforms and endless platforms that we have in the market. It's increased the scalability issues that we have, and of course today we are working in Agile methodology, so it's Agile-oriented solution. The solution is talking about how we take same things, similar things together and implement it as one automation repository, and take the differences between platforms and try to deal with it. So we will do some little demonstration for you to understand. My colleague here, Al-Hanan, will demonstrate it, and we took a little product about beers that they have application and web as well. So to you, Al-Hanan.
Hey all, and thanks for joining us. Here in this demonstration we are going to see one project, one code to rule them all. We are going to test with one code, one project, multiple platforms. Generally speaking, we can test many platforms as we want. For instance, we can use one code to work on iOS, on Android, on web, whatever you want. In this demonstration, we are going to see one code, one project, testing one app, one internet app, on a device and on Chrome browser. The app is called Untapped. It's a hidden app for social media for beer lovers. In this demonstration, we'll see one code doing both platforms. As you can see here, this is a login function for both platforms. It looks the same, it's doing the same, its practice is the same. But under the hood, it's using 2 different automation platforms, such as Appium and Selenium. As you all must know, Appium and Selenium are pretty much relatives. So we can use one code to rule them all. And if, as you can see here, For instance, in this login function, we are trying to locate the username input. And we use in two lines, the same lines for both platforms. The only difference is what we are looking for. In this case, we are testing on the fly, mid-run. Are we mobile? If we are using this locator. And if we are not, we are using Chrome browser on a desktop, we are using this. But that solves all the difference in this particular field. Most of the project looks like this. There isn't any much difference. You can use one code to route them all. There are some cases where there are some small differences, like for instance the click connect button. On mobile we are looking for a list and choosing one of the elements, and on Chrome we are just looking for one element and just clicking it. As you can see, this is a minor change, and about 90% of the code, even more, is exactly the same. Under the hood, the automation chooses which platform to load as you ask for it. We can do this on many platforms as we like. And now for the demonstration. We are now we'll run this test on the device. As you can see here, we can see the console for Appium, telling us what it's going to do, and here we can see the actual device. It's a real live device. Appium is not firing up. What you're going to see here is log into the app, and then looking for one location and checking if we got the wanted result. As you can see here, the app's loaded up. We are now going to the login function, as you see here. We are going to log into the app. Here you can see exactly what Appium is doing under the hood. Now he's going to look for a special place. Choose the first one. And I'm going to check the correct one was opened. As you can see, the test has passed. And now we'll do the same thing for Chrome. It's the same code, the same project. I didn't change anything, only parameters. As you can see here, all of the test has passed. Now after we've seen the test pass and everything okay, let's see the report. This automation is connected to a HTML report generator who generates a special report. can see here, we can see the report, we have screenshots and everything we want. We can see the dates, what passed, what failed, and filter everything as you like. Now let's see the same for the device. Here, same thing, same deal, same code, hold them all.
Thank you, Hanan. So what you actually saw here is to have two birds on one function. In that way, you actually decreasing the costs of time of bring up when you actually implement in one function a lot of devices. So what we solved, we have same code library for functionality behavior. And of course, when working with a customer, we need to sync between production developers and the QI planners. So everybody will know the same elements and same behavior between every platforms and plan the differences together. And of course, we need a hybrid lab for platform scalability and coverage. So let's talk about hybrid lab. As you see here, we have a lab here in the center of the automation. We have the same code repository to everybody. We have the same code repository for everybody, and we have a manager controller that takes risk. The risk is between physical layer and an emulator devices. Because we have a relationship between every manufacturer like Huawei, Samsung, etc., we have every build that there is exist of every platform that was brought up to the market. So in that way, we can have a reference of logic test of a simple application web. And when we have an issue, we can go to the hybrid manager and tell him, well, we have an issue. So now we have we will have reference as in the physical devices. So we will run it. In that way, we're decreasing the amount of devices that we need, the physical devices, but we actually have all the 100 coverage that we need to go as a testers. So in this way, we will take the risk, but we are not decreasing the quality of the tests. And of course, we have the same coverage of a regular lab that have every physical device. Of course, there is no, today in the market, a lab that have every manufacturer device that there is in the market, but we need to go it. Let's talk about a little bit agile point of view to understand it. Today, we don't talk about products. Nowadays, we are doing and develop features, little features in the product itself. So every role job there is near the feature, like a developer of the production or developer in the automation or tester, actually working together as a group on one feature. But this is increasing the regression test. In hybrid automation, by the way, we can actually decrease the amount of the regression, and we'll talk about it later. Let's talk about a little bit development model. Today, in quality test, we have a different way to have a service to the customer. We have on-site bring up automation in the customer side, and we have the center for bringing up automation tests from our side. And of course, we involve with the community with open source tools. So in that way, when syncing everything together, we actually have a lot of tools and a lot of areas that we're working with to the customer. So the goal here and what we have because of the thinking, we have strong knowledge thinking of 20 years of existing as quality test. We have new technology and methodology sharing that we can do from the community or into the community. In that way, we're increasing our knowledge. And it's easy to use with open source tools. So actually, in this way, we have a zero-time automation goal in maximum efficiency of the automation. And this is really, really important today, now times that every technology is new and we have a lot of bring up features and new methodology of every business role. So we actually get something that is really, really similar to the customer with a lot of knowledge that we can bring it up to him. So actually, as an end-to-end workflow, it gives the ability to have full regression in less time, because this is all about, we need to see that every feature in the past, existing feature in the product, didn't have issues because of new features that came up. And it's the ability to have and insert new features to the regression workflows in really, really short time. The problem with automation mostly is that in a lot of ways we can't see what happened in real time, and in that way we have real-time monitoring on it. And we have the ability to invest more time in integration for new features when we research everything from scratch with all the new. Planning is crucial. We need a test plan, a good test plan for automation, and we need a really, really good scripting capabilities in a lot of different area of codes. And we need to put it all in one good and solid infrastructure. For that, we have a professional test plan methodology, and we have a knowledge with a lot of area of coding scripting. Hybrid automation code approach is getting us be more efficient with hybrid lab. So in that way, we're bringing up a really short time, something like 50% shorter. And as I said, we need a good infrastructure of stable CI/CD for execution. For doing that, we need experience with code coverage testing, and I will talk about it later. And we need to have analyzing capability for dynamic health reports for our customers. In every customer, there is a lot of levels. We have level of developers, and we have like VP R&Ds. Everybody wants to see the report in their point of view, and we need to do it dynamically, and we do it. Here is a little examples of areas that we are bring up automation, what I call an IoT areas. We have the web and mobile. I know this is a really, really good buzzwords today with Selenium and Appium, but if you have an Angular system, it's better to use, for example, a protractor in JavaScript. It makes things easier and faster. So not everything is as good as a backbone with Selenium and Appium, but it depends on your needs. Of course, in load and stress, we are using JMeter and LoadRunner and etc. And we have a relationship with Amazon to have a cloud testing and have a Unix duplication for testing test cases. And in API, of course, we are using SOAP and QTP, Big Data Hookup, etc. And we have an hybrid on Power as well. So if we need to have a Power testing with a lot of scenarios, we can use it too. Let's talk a little bit about infrastructure. In the classic way, in our customers, there are one cockpit, one stop shop of controller between the continuous integration and the development. Here in the blue color, you have the production developers, and in the green, we have the automation developers. Well, the problem is in that way is when you have one controller and one of the stages are stuck or somehow, the whole workflow actually will not work. And we have a lot of examples of customers that got into us and asked us to help them because they didn't understand why it didn't work. So our solution is actually easy. Let's do two split between the continuous integration controlling and management and the continuous development deployment management, and let's do some relationships between them. So if you have duplications and multiple cross productions for cross customers that you have, we will not stack the whole process. And in that way, if one process of the deployment is stuck, we will not stop testing other productions of other versions of the productions. So it's actually easy to use and not stuck the workflow. We talk about code coverage. Code coverage is really, really important to observe the efficiency of the code. By observing code functionality duplication, we need to see if the same duplicate functions doing the same things, and we need to reduce them. And the third thing that's really, really important is to observe how much test plan we use vs the code scalability, how much a test we did, execution, and covered by touching the code scalability of functionality. This is a little example of tools that we use, mostly familiar of Emma in Java when we are doing a web functionality, but we have Calco as well for C#. So there is a lot of different tools for different coverage code. Here is a little example how we put some plug of Jenkins for Emma, and you see your example of coverage code by doing some simple test coverage. So if we are testing something, even if it's manual, we can see and monitoring how and what functions were touched in that test. So it's really, really important. So if you have questions, I will be happy to answer, me or Elchanan.
Okay, lovely. Well, thank you, Shlomi, for an informative and interesting presentation, and Elchanan for the demo. So let's get started on questions then. I've got one here. What is the difference between the iOS and Android approach when you bring up automation?
I think Elchanan can answer that question. Elchanan?
Hello everyone. When you approaching testing for iOS and Android, there are some differences, but when you're talking about the code, and actually the code itself, there are adjustments for using the right driver or some anything like that. But it's like we saw in the demo, when you're doing, you could do it one project and use on iOS and Android. There will be some minor adjustments for things that work well on Android and less working on iOS and vice versa. But most of the projects itself, most of the code will be exactly the same. The main differences are in things like the locators themselves, the objects you use. So when you're trying to build up an automation framework, you need to address the special issues for each platform. You can address it in one project, you can do it in one stone to kill the board, but you still need to address some issues. So for example, if you want to test an iOS app, you've got to get the right build when you use Appian, for instance. Because if you don't have the right build that was built actually and especially for testing, Appian will not be able to interact with it. For in Android, for instance, you don't need. You can you only need some parameters to know how to load the app and which activity to start. But when so in this approach, the differences are there, but there are many in the beginning when you try to see which build you can test and how to load the app but mainly when we're talking about the code, it's exactly the same. Only for, like you saw in the demo, use different locators and such things.
Okay, thank you,
that
Hanan.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, next question here. What is the actual method of hybrid automation testing from physical layer to emulation?
Well, as I said, the approach is to have a reference. Sometimes when we are testing something with what I call the whole package, that means that we use a physical device in a real environment, you actually get a lot of issues from the environment, so you can't research what happened in the logic way. So the real good approach that we came up is to actually start with emulation without interference of the environment, right? And go logically. So we actually will test the application on some ideal environment without interference. And other we have some logical problems and issues, we will need to test them on a physical layer. Sometimes, not all the times, it's solving the problems between references. So if we will test a real device with real environment, we will not get some issues from the logics, and vice versa, by the way. And I see here that Colden asked for a couple of slides back. What is the definitions of bullet point 3 for code scalability? Well, when you are using a duplicate codes, so your efficiency of the scalability is going down because you are actually invest more time of getting a lot of functions of different platforms with duplicate functions that you wrote. So in that way, you get a scalability of functions by reducing a lot of code and still have a scalability of functions to the platforms. So it's a QA testing point of view for using a little code with a lot of platforms. That's the first. Hope for getting it right. Another question here. In your hybrid code example, you showed code for multiple platforms with a single method. With switching statement, would you recommend the approach or extending the class and overriding the method in a separate class for each platform? I think Hanan can solve that.
Yes, of course. When it's a great question, actually, but the answer to it is very simple. You have to ask yourself one question. Is the app, when you're talking about iOS or Android, for example, how much difference there are between the platforms? If there are much difference and things even sometimes logically play differently, sometimes it's the same thing and you only use different name for the buttons. So the main question you need to ask yourself is how much the platforms are different when you're talking about your app or website or whatever you're testing. Because if there are minor changes, like the button is the name of the button or anything like that, that I will recommend to use like the switch you can do in many different ways in which language you want to write in. But if there are many differences, you should use the interfaces and override the methods. But only if there are many differences between the platforms.
Okay, thank you, Hanan. Um, So if there are not more questions,
Questions? Lovely.
yeah.
Okay,
So thank you
well,
all.
Thank you, everyone. Yes, the webinar is now concluded. So thank you again to our presenter, Shlomi, and to all the viewers for your attendance. Just a reminder, a recording of this webinar will be available on demand within the next 24 hours, and we'll also email a link to you with a link to the recording. So in the meantime, we look forward to welcoming you at our next webinar. Until then, goodbye. Goodbye, everyone.